Da-da-da-ding. Hello, everyone. Well, first of all, I gotta do this. I hope you're all well. Let's see. Today is Friday. If I'm not mistaken, it's the 5th of November. Which is always fun. Hello. Now, first of all, congratulations to Drac NFL for getting to 300,000 subscribers. He really, really deserves it, and it's really cool. And honestly, I have to say thank you to him as well for helping me out yesterday. We got my friend successfully moved. So, right then. And we got Build Trumps recorded this morning. Which is going to be a Dr. Clarke and Drac episode of Bilge Pump. So, all I'll say is this. Everyone be prepared. Next week's episode, when it comes out of Bilge Trumps, is going to be long. Okay? It's going to be long. Hello, Peter Dawson. Hello, Rick Vasava. Hello, Jack Ray. Hello, John Shea. Hello, Abel Zaski. Hello, Graham Honda. Hello, DH89. Hello. Lovely to have you here. You don't often get it. Well, it's good to have you here. Hello, John Shea. Hello, Timmy Locker. Hello, M35 Benvids. Hello, World War II Submarine History with a Haiku. I like that. I like that. I don't know if I've said I like your name before, but I do like your name. Mainly because I'm not sure, but actually that name might actually itself be a bit of a haiku. Almost. Not quite, but almost. And hello, Felix B. Hello, Andrew Bend. Hello, Jonathan Burrow. Hello, Stafford Thompson. Hello. And Steve Richards. Hello. And Karma Gasberg. Hello. Hello, everyone. How are you doing? Hope you're having a good evening. Now, if you cannot hear behind me, 5th of November is fireworks night in the UK. This is the holiday which I grew up with a kid before Halloween became the dominant holiday in October. In November, October, November, the period. Guy Fawkes night was always the big one. If anyone wants to know about Guy Fawkes night, it commemorates an attempt which failed to blow up the House of Parliament. And every year, by tradition, you stick an effigy of a human man on top of a bonfire and set it alight to commemorate. And you also fire off a lot of fireworks. And for those of you who are going, no, that's pagan rituals. No, we've been doing that, and that started during a very high Protestant period. Hello, Colin Cameron. Hello, Knight6831. Hello, Jack Ray. Thank you. I hope you can still find some Ironbury with 1901. Actually, at the moment, all my money is going to go into a new car fund. Yes, you guessed right. My car has managed to blow up its gearbox. I love my Subaru, but it has managed to blow its gearbox up, so this is why I've got cheesy chips. They are basically I needed something to comfort food this evening. So, yeah. But actually, it's rather appropriate because I was looking at all the stuff to do with turbines and gearing and all that sort of stuff for this, and then my gearbox blows up. The live stream on Toronto will be next week on the 11th of November, 96831. It's on the 11th. So, now, I'm going to tell you this honestly. Avlaski, manual automatic gearbox. Automatic. I have an automatic for everyone else's defense. Because when I'm having to do urban driving and shift 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, yeah, on the way to work when I'm having to drive into what is Greater London, me having an automatic and not having to do that and being able to mentally, to an extent, switch off a bit more Saves lives. Don't worry, there will probably be another Subaru coming. Because that's what it's either going to be a Subaru or Volvo. Anyway, so in 1805, we have the Battle of Trafalgar. The age of sail is dominant. These are the most powerful ships of their age. It's the most powerful fleet of its age, arguably, other than the Channel Fleet, which is bigger than it, and the French fleet in the Brest, which is bigger than it. Arguably, actually, the Franco-Spanish fleet, which evolves and fights, but, you know, arguably most powerful fleet in the world. And they are made up of sail ships. They are the tippy-toppy of the sail ship era. If you were sitting on one of these ships in 1805, you would be thinking nothing will ever be more powerful than this. It will just be bigger and bigger version of this. You know, you could be excused for not imagining anything more powerful, more capable than what you see in front of you. Yet by 1905, the warships of the day will be incredibly different. Now, we've been over many, many times exactly how different and how the options for HMS Dreadnought built up. And I'll be talking more about some of those options that were available. You know, one of the things that interests me and Drac quite a lot is the various guns which could have been, if they'd been a more normal procurement process, could have been chosen instead. It's a fun system. It's a fun thing to think about. But in 1805, you're dealing with fleets which dash across the world's oceans as a fairly normal thing. Then no one blinks twice about crossing the world's oceans and back. Think about that. No one thinks twice about this. Naval warfare, by its very nature, in 1805 is already global. And there is a god of naval warfare in many ways, in terms of after he dies, he becomes it. But as Knight 6831 has pointed out, technology doesn't stand still. But who in 1805 could predict where they get by 1905? It is a different age. And it's an age which actually catches up fairly quickly because, honestly, if we think about the Battle of Trafalgar, and when I'm talking about this, a lot of the changes which come about and create the Dreadnought do not come about in a linear fashion. Technology doesn't do a nice straight line. It does more of a curve. Yeah, if he can, I can arch it. See, I can do this when I'm standing up far easier than I can when I'm sitting down. So anyway, imagine telling them in 1805 a ship with only 12 guns will be the most powerful in the world. Yeah. That's the thing. In this period, these ships have hundreds of guns, some of them. Your third rate usually has at least 74. You turn around to someone and go, oh yeah, they'll have 12 guns. Most powerful ship in the world. What? And that happens time and time again in history. Because technology and human development doesn't necessarily work out the way we think it should do when we're looking at it. Hello, Vice Admiral Nelson. It's nice of you to be here. If anyone notices me looking slightly wry, there are some kids running up and down the path outside on this side. And they're having a lovely time watching the fireworks going off and giggling about them. It's a fun time. But also, the fact is about technology is that it can pancake for a while. It can stabilize. And that's often something which you might not realize when you're in it, because you might see lots of little changes going on, but you don't see what's bubbling underneath the surface. DH9, why did the 74 gun become so standard across European navies? It's the size of the ship. It's the size and cost factor. And also the fact that the French were building so many and the British just kept capturing them. Allow for standardization. No. The guns, everything that goes into it, a 74 is at the right price point to be churned out in large numbers. For everything else, you have to explain why you need that over 74. And do you need that as many of them? You don't. Lewis Frank, it's been said that generals tend to fight the last war. It's probably true for many admirals. Admirals, to an extent, are less able to do that than generals. This is going to sound strange, but admirals get technology chucked in their face far more than generals do. There's usually some of them who are prepared to do that, but not many. But here's the first steam-powered battleship. Or rather, steam-powered warship. The Demenologus, or Fulton, made by Robert Fulton, for the American Navy, is basically a floating battery supposed to defend a harbour. And it's steam-powered. Now, anyone looking at the ship and going, Alex, that's not that can't be A-15. That looks like the Merrimack. You know, surely that's the same concept as the Merrimack, and you'd be damn right it is the same concept as the Merrimack. But one's about 50 years after the other. Which shows you perhaps that technology doesn't change that much. Or rather, they're using steam power, but turrets haven't come about. Turbines haven't come about. Got a very interesting engine structure, which worked once or twice a day. Okay, I'll be honest. Once or twice a blue moon. It did work well for a while, and it was certainly a wonder of its age, but it didn't cause a mass investment in steam. It didn't cause a mass love of steam, because everyone was looking at going, but it's got 20 guns on it. Yes! I suppose it protects the harbour, but it's got 20 guns on it. Azaski, on gun subject, Zumwalt's getting their AGS replaced with hypersonic missiles. Don't worry, Bilge Pumps has already talked about this today, and it will come out next week. And yes, we were crying. We were about predicting it and talking about it ages ago. Azaski, it looks like a soap dish. You would not be wrong. Hello, Melanie. Hello, Jessica Lou. Now, I would point out that Fulton claimed many things about this ship. Many, many things. And let's just consider some of them. Now, she is technically a floating battery. She is technically a catamaran, with her paddle wheel sandwiched between the two hulls. If you're all sitting there going, that's a catamaran? Yes, it is. Technically, it's a catamaran, okay? A weird one, but a catamaran. The steam engine is mounted one side. The boiler, I think, is mounted the other. She was designed to carry 30 32-pounder guns, 24 port and starboard and 6 fore and aft. The Navy couldn't acquire, though. The US Navy couldn't acquire sufficient guns. And in fact, she's never fitted with all her guns, and this is roughly the battery she works with is roughly 20 guns. Pretty much, how do I put this politely? The US Navy planned to build a number of these until they found that they couldn't go anywhere. So they would have to build them individually, wherever they were. Because it couldn't go on the high seas. It had a lot of problems. But it is, to an extent, the forerunner of what's to come. The forerunner of the ships that will be built to serve the US Navy in the Civil War. In that, it starts off the idea that not only are you using paddle propulsion, but you're going to have to protect that paddle wheel. And arguably, one of the issues that it has with itself and its operation is protecting a paddle wheel. Because this is the other option you have, and this is HMS Gorgon, one of the first Royal Navy sailing frigates, which are, how do I put this? There are ships which are smaller, which have 9 or so guns and are basically sloops of war with paddle steamers, etc. But this is one of the first considered a frigate. And how do I put this politely? She's ordered in 1834. She's launched in 1837, commissioned in 1838, and this picture is painted over 1840. She takes part in the Battle of Valletta d'Obbligo, which is an rather interesting and random battle between the Argentine Confederation, the UK, and France, in which the Anglo-French forces deploy a force of 11 warships, and the Argentinians deploy 4 coastal batteries, 1 brigantine, and 2 gunboats. It's for some reason described by many as a Pyrrhic victory. I'm never quite sure. Okay, they win the battle but don't really win the war, but the British suffer damage to several warships which forces emergency repairs, but honestly, the Argentines suffer much more. Much, much more. Life happens. And by the 1840s, this is the sort of steamship you're seeing. This is the vessel. Hello, and pull that back wider. 96 20 guns, and you can point almost 8 of them at a target at the same time. Yes, that's always fun. That soap dish was Dioglos, the first steam warship, theoretically, produced in 1815. Good evening, Shimi. Most of it did claim how cute it was and you could put it in your back pocket and carry around. No, she wasn't quite that small. So the modern equivalent of this is an SSK, potentially. Colin Cameron. So basically the first USS literal combat ship. Potentially. John J. So next week's build prompt's about 2+ hours long. I'm keeping a respectful silence about how long it is. Well, how many Devils were sunk? Only one was built. It didn't last that long. It did not last that long. Well, okay, so the Battle of Velta de Kiel is part of. It's one of those rather interesting things, which is not really part of a war. It's part of the Anglo-French blockade of the Rio de la Plata, and it basically, the trouble is with the battle is, whilst they did win, they proved that it was not safe to navigate Argentine internal waters against his government's wishes. And it also, how do I put this, caused trouble for Britain and France with the rest of the body politic of the Brazil of South America. So basically, it upset Brazil, who didn't mind Argentina being blockaded, but they didn't like them actually being beaten up because that was their job. And I'm not joking about that. That is basically what one of the Brazilian politicians at the time says. Fun times. Fun times and some fun history. Let's do some more. And then we have HMS Amphion. Now, Amphion is one of the first screw frigates. Now, before anyone starts telling me I'm saying not bad words, that means she's one of the first propeller-powered frigates, because originally they're called screw frigates. Now, she is ordered in 1828 as a sail frigate, but there's no war going on, so they take it very slowly. And she's reordered in 1844 as a screw frigate. She's laid down in 1840, launched in 1846, and commissioned in 1847, and this is a painting of her in 1848. She ordered originally as HMS Ambuscade, but renamed Amphion on the 31st of March, 1831. And she sold in 1863. She's a 36-gun frigate. She's got a middle deck armed with 6 8-inch shell guns and 14 32-pounder, and an upper deck with 2 68-pounders and 14 2-pounders. She did manage to serve in the Baltic Sea during the Crimean War. She ran aground at Viipuri, near the Grand Duchy of Finland, and was fired upon by Russian artillery. She really doesn't have that amazing career, but she's there. And the thing is, the good point about these ships is they start to really illustrate the fact that this was an era of transition. That's awesome. Apologies. I'm taking care of leaves at home and remembering the students on Mori. Yeah, I almost had to call my brother to get me off the roof. Mm-hmm. Always put in a rope. Tim Richards, what's the Gorgon Ironclad? Nope, none of these are ironclad. They're just steam powered. Ironclad takes a while to get to. These are steam powered. Basically, Brazil has no trouble with us beating up the Argentinians occasionally. They just don't want us actually going into Argentinian territorial waters. It's one of those little things. If we want to beat up the Argentinians, they're happy for that. They're just not happy for us to actually go into Argentinian territorial waters. Sam Thompson, so 120 guns to 12. 12 to 2 today? Well, you could say it's reversing, because now we count missiles instead of guns. Don't we? And missiles, if you go to the the new Type 83 paper when it comes out, written by myself and Drakenfell, well, that's counting in missiles. Animal 16365. How long did panel wheel warships last before screw parallel ships came to predominance? Well, the interesting thing is they run alongside each other for decades. It takes a while to work out which is better, because honestly, for a lot of the time, the paddle wheel looks more efficient than the propeller in terms of propulsion. And it means you don't have to pierce the bottom of your hull. Which means you don't have to make a hole in the bottom of your hull. Which quite a lot of officers quite like the idea of not having to do. But, hello John Evans, but they do testing, and we'll be getting to that. Dave Thompson, so the Constellation having 32 is a return to the old iron size then? You could say that, certainly. I'd possibly classify her as a 5th or 6th rate. Well, 5th rate. Wait. Con Cramron, I've seen some reproductions of any screw designs in the early screw designs in the Transport Museum, and you can see the early designs are just chopped off Archimedean screws. Yeah, there is definitely that possibility. Technically, every projectile launched from a gun is a missile. Please don't go down that route. I have just about managed to get Drac happy with the maths as it is. You start us down that route, I will never get that paper done. No, he will get. He's good. It will just confuse the SimSec people more. So, here is the Rattler versus Lecter. It's one of the most famous of these battles. And you've guessed it. This is the tug-of-war naval style. Now, there are various options for what ships to produce. And the first steam-powered vessels had actually appeared in 1788, but it took a while before anyone actually worked out how to use it properly. In fact, the wheel mounted in the middle between two hulls was the original mounting idea of it. Now, the Royal Navy is always interested in technology. So, in March 1845, they decide that what they're going to do, Rattler, fitted with the propellers, and Alecto, which had roughly the same power, were put through a series of trials. The first trial was a race of over 100 miles, which the Rattler won comfortably. Next came this, the tug of war, that's been painted and reproduced many times. And honestly, I'm always surprised Star Trek never reproduced this with different engines to try and work out which was the most powerful ship or something like that. Because it was such an iconic idea. The frigates were tied stern to stern and both sailed off in the different directions. Two ships operating at full power. Rattler, it took her a while, but slowly built up momentum and was eventually at full power. And remember, they had engines which were, broadly speaking, the same rating, very similar, able to pull the Alecto along at 2.7 knots. So it was worth it. She was both faster and more powerful. And why does this matter? Well, because how else was the Royal Navy supposed to work out which would be better in storm, which would be better in rough seas? And traditional perception at the time was that paddle-wheeled ships would be better in rough seas. Because, if you're in a big enough wave, the propeller could come out, whereas the paddle should always be at some point in the water, one or the other. It's some rather fun history. Wow. You can tell when I change between the different coloured pages of my notes, can't you? Gone to the white page of A4, and I've got the yellow page of A4, and you can tell when the colour changes. There was a paddle-wheeled aircraft carrier on the Great Lakes during World War II as part of the aero training. I think it was USS Wolverine. Jonathan Burrow. So prototypes were usually small ships, then moved to bigger scale. Pretty much. Basically, you try it out with a small ship first because if it proves terrible, you don't have to explain to the politicians why the brand new paddle ship they paid the equivalent of billions for has just gone wrong. If it's a small tugboat or, as in these cases, sloop, then if something goes wrong, well, it's a sloop that's bad. It still works. With the VLS, modern missile systems went for Alpha Strike instead of DPS. Potentially, yes. Hello, Frank Spasato. John Simmons. Weren't early steamships just used to tow sail ships? There was actually quite a lot of that. There's even a few battles where the early tugboats do have that. Did the Star Trek have tractor beams? At the point they were still trying to decide which was better. I think they still had they might have had those towing cables. I seem to remember the early episode series of the Captain Archer Enterprise had grappling hooks at one point. Hieroglyph. Lessons from the past matter for present issues. It was the case. Arms developments in the interwar era may have lessons for our era. Arms developments in this area may have lessons for us. Testing it, deciding which one to pursue is difficult. Bitron, they did tugs of war with locomotives, including steam versus electric. I have a big photo of a GE electric versus two steam engines on the Milwaukee Road in the Pacific Northwest. Cool. Yep, Sable was the other parcels themed CV. Hello, Juan. Hello, Juan Rodriguez. Sonic and Aero paddle ships are still used on the Danube. They are. The paddle ships are perfectly fine and viable. Anyway, Next thing that comes up is the Gloire, which is the French going, hey, we can do this. We have this great idea about producing an ironclad. And there are only some small issues with her. She is kind of a floating, a sea-going Douglas. The Gloire. Ugh. How do I explain it? Right then. So first of all, you have to know that she is designed by French naval architect and all-round inspirational person for the French Navy as Henri Dupé de l'Homme. Yes, that name has come back to haunt us again. Dupé de l'Homme. She's a 5,630-ton broadside ironclad with a wooden hull. And basically, she has 12-centimeter thick, that's 4.7-inch armor plates, backed by 43 centimeters, or 17 inches, of timber. And they tried this armor against being shot at by the strongest guns of the time, the French 50-pounder and the British 68-pounder, at full charge at a distance of 20 meters. So in other words, if you ever want to have an example of someone preparing to refight the previous war, here you go. There's Gloire. She is built to refight the Battle of Trafalgar. Fight at ranges of 20 meters. Her maximum speed was theoretically 13 knots, but this is a Dupé de l'Homme produced ship, so reality was 11 knots, and if you were lucky, and everything was behind you and you were happy. They started off by trying to fit her with a barkentine rig. They found that this, as is this displays, didn't work. So they had to increase her to full rig, because otherwise she didn't move. I would like to point this out. She is often compared to the Dreadnought, as apparently her appearance rendered obsolete traditional unarmored wooden ships of the line. No, it didn't, because most of the wooden unarmored ships of the line could actually outpace her. And especially the ones which actually had steam power, could really outpace her. And the ones which couldn't outpace her, well, yes, they'd be in trouble, but the problem is there are lots of ships which are semi-armored, and there are ships which have been worked on which have all sorts of things going on. And she has a sister, Corion, which was 20% a rebuilt version of her. But she's, as built, is armed with 36 164mm rifled muzzle-loading guns. By 1868, she is armed with 6 240mm breech-loading guns and 2 192mm breech-loading guns. She also has a conning tower, which has 100 millimeters of armor around her. Yep. DH-89, it's quite cool that they had the resources to have a physical trials between two ships. Are there any mod examples during procurement? But via computer simulation, I imagine. That's the thing they do now. They do computer simulations. No one has the resources. This is another thing you have to remember. One of the problems for the Royal Navy in the 1800s to sort of the mid to late 1800s is an embarrassment of riches. In that, if an admiral turns up in Parliament and goes, "We have to build something to match this threat," they'll just pay for it. There's barely any questions asked. And this means that the Navy gets money to build stuff, and this is one of the reasons why you end up with all these weird building programs and all the stuff which Fisher does actually have to deal with when he becomes First Sea Lord and tries to get rid of stuff, is literally because of that problem, because they've almost had too many resources. And the trouble is, there hasn't been the sort of controlling hand which will keep that in line and build up a sensible formation. Although you can see occasionally Royal Navy try something out, likes it, and then builds up a healthy bunch of it because they find it useful. Oswilski, hello, where is the Fluffy Central Battery Ironclad? As there is a lot of fireworks going on this evening, they both have gone for their walks early, and they are now snoozing in the lounge. Hello, Nook. And this is the real problem for the French. And this is the really big problem for the French. Because Glas, it comes into service, is launched in 1859 and is completed in 1860. HMS Warrior is laid down in 1859, launched in 1860, and in service by 1861. She's actually completed October 1861, but actually commissioned August 1861. It proves that navies sometimes do things for political reasons. The problem with Port Gloire versus this ship, well, let's be honest. Warrior, for starters, is carrying 26 68-pounder guns, 10 rifled breech-loading 110-pounder guns, and 4 rifled breech-loading 40-pounder guns. And that's the 26 smoothbore muzzle-loading guns. Those ones. Her armor is 4.5 inches of wrought iron, backed by 18 inches of teak. So it's a sort of interesting idea in that the French one is 4.7 inches, the British one is 4.5 inches, but the French one has 17 inches of timber behind it, and the British one has 18 inches of timber behind it. And it's teak. Very specifically, it is teak, which is considered the creme de la creme of woods to pick for this. The plates were interlocked via tongue and groove method, and the armor was made up by 3 by 12-foot armor plates. They're all bolted through the teak to the iron hull, which is underneath it. And the teak itself consists of 2 9-inch thick layers laid at right angles to each other. This was supposed to reduce things like splinters and reduce the force of impact by distributing the energy wider over the hull. Tests at Sherbiness in October 1861, when Warrior was launched, decided it was practically invulnerable to ordnance at time in use. The armor, you also have to remember, doesn't cover the full length of the ship. It covers the middle 64.9 meters or 213 feet of it, and extends 16 feet above the waterline and 6 feet below the waterline. So in many ways, it's what we call an armored battery ship, because the things that are protected are its engines and its battery. The fore and aft bit aren't. And again, Warrior's propulsion. Well, as we pointed out, Glar was pretty much 11 knots on a good day. The Royal Navy weren't really happy with the idea of 11 knots. So, Warrior was designed and shown to be tested as capable of 14 knots under steam power alone. She carried enough coal to steam 2,100 nautical miles at 11 knots. So was her cruising speed was 11 knots, not her top speed. She was fully ship-rigged, having a sail area of 48,400 square feet, or roughly 4.5 square kilometers. And she did reach 13 knots under sail alone, which was actually, and this is the interesting thing, 2 knots faster than her sister ship HMS Black Prince. She's a very powerful and very critical ship. Because pretty much the French had gone, look at what we built. And then the British had gone, okay, we'll build something better. And they did. Straight away. They built something better. Oh, 6.5. I wonder if the French were treating their ship designs like food or was experimenting. Not really. The French don't experiment as much, but Dupuy de l'Homme does love to experiment. Hieroglyph. Germany's war model in 1939 was predicted to fail catastrophically by the German general staff. They literally went to a war expecting to lose, and with a plan for after the lost war. That wouldn't surprise me. Not a all. Free car troubles. Oof. Subarus are reliable. When they go, they do go. That is the truth. Manisura, what were those measurements of again? Those were the armor. So if we go back to HMS Warrior, she has 4.5 inches of wrought iron armor, and that's over 18 inches of teak, which is bolted on all the way through to the iron hull. So she's got an iron hull, which then has 18 inches of teak in 2 sets of 9-inch at right angles to each other. And then a further 4.5 inches thick armor on the outside of that. So it basically goes iron, teak, iron. Produces quite a strong ship. And Gloire, well, she has 4.7 inches of armor. So she has actually got thicker iron armor, but she only has 17 inches of timber, whereas Warrior has 18 inches of timber. So it's whether you think an inch extra of wood, and especially as it's a teak, best you can get, is going to help you more than an extra 0.2 inches of armor. Which do you think is better? Here's the question. Let's see, what was the best wood to use for below the waterline? They tended to use teak as well. Teak and oak were what they liked. Let's see, 6 feet should be enough to take a lot of energy out of a ball. So, cannon shot is relatively low velocity, which doesn't get as stopped as quickly in water. And it's basically, it descends all 14 feet. Let's see, on the water line. So if you look at that red line on that on the painting of HMS Warrior, the armor goes 16 feet above the water line. and 6 feet below it. So she's got 22 feet, or roughly 6.7 meters height armor belt running around her. Colin Cameron, given the time period, it makes you wonder if Glar had tried to interdict the Grace Eastern, if she would have had a speed 16 knots away, or use her wake to sink the Glar. Great Eastern would have just used her speed. You know, and let's be honest, the Rattler, the vessel we were talking about earlier, was built by Isambard Kingdom Brunel, the one used in the test. So she's one of the ships which has been designed by AKB. So the Royal Navy the Royal Navy weren't exactly shy in hiring the engineering greats of their day. DH89, I'm not at all an expert, but if you tour Warrior in Portsmouth, she seems positively luxurious, and as you say, a power statement here of embarrassment of riches. But it has dinners on it. Yes, you can have dinners on board Warrior. In fact, speaking of dinners, I was actually invited to a dinner on HMS Belfast, but now with car replacement not going. But Warrior, there is a dinner being hosted on it next year, which I might be able to get a ticket to, which I really want to go to, because I would love to have dinner aboard her. She's a beautiful ship, and I've heard they're very, very good. It's actually easier to get an invite to a dinner aboard HMS Victory, probably because they do more of them, than it is aboard Warrior, from what I've heard. Hieroglyph. French doctrine in 1880 circa was good, of course. Commerce rating. The idea being to interdict the UK trade. This was later taken up by the German Navy. So fast ships are to be expected. The trouble is, the Gloir's not fast. Oswaldski. So Gloire is like the Dreadnought, but the English response is building a motor. Let's be more respectful. The Gloire is like the Bismarck, but the English response is to build an Iowa. Most frank, the preservation of HMS Warrior makes me sadder that HMS Warspite was scrapped after World War I and World War II. At least I got to visit Warrior in Belfast. It does. I'm glad Warrior is preserved. I think she should be preserved. She's one of those crucial points of history. And taking students around her is always an amazing experience, even if they do try and climb up her rigging. But, yeah, if you look, the ropes there. And, yeah, there's one. See? This, the stern mast. Those ropes. Stern mast, port side. That's what I have to, where I had to get them down from. Anyway, leaving that to one side. They have fun. But this isn't where the thing is, the British ironclads and the French ironclads don't really get to do much. They don't get to do fighting. And if you consider what fighting happens, it's Monter versus Merrimack. That's the ironclad battle of the period. Vice Admiral, was the teak part of Warrior's armor thought to be a fire hazard with installations of a firefighting place, or did they just think grenades would bounce? No, they did have firefighting installations, etc., throughout the ship and all sorts of things, but they had stuff worked out for how to deal with that. But also, teak is quite difficult to put on fire. It takes a lot of effort to get teak to start burning. Once it does, it burns beautifully, but getting it to burn takes a while. It's a very good hardwood. The ship in total is 128 meters overall. So there's 59 meters of the ship unarmored, which, if I remember correctly, is 30 meters aft and 29 meters forward. Yeah, 29 meters. Hang on. Yeah, 29 meters forward. From memory. Roughly. Minute 6040, in that answer, does Victory have our own subset? Same question, reward it? Yes, they do. Mm-hmm. Arglyph, if the French had been able to bring Tyrannosaurus Rexes with them on the Gloire, they could have been useful as boarding parties? If they could have done, yes, but that's very much off topic. I did get them down before anyone noticed and before they caused any trouble. Lionheart X-Ray, you know you love that story. I sort of do. Jones, Warriors reserved by means of no one had realized she was still around to get rid of her. I still think they should have let HMS Warspite just hide out in Cornwall. I doubt the politicians would have ever realized where she was until someone worked it out 30 years later. By that point, they'd have had to preserve her. Right then. So, you have to remember the Battle of Hampton Roads is between Merrimack, which was supposed to be a conventional steam frigate. Honestly, not too dissimilar to this vessel, Amphion. And Monitor, which was a rush build. And basically, the Confederates had salvaged Merrimack from the Norfolk Navy Yard, rechristened her Virginia, and cut away the upper hull, and armored everything with iron. One of the things I find funny about this is a Britannica article so it calls this a masterpiece of improvisation reassembled. I'm not sure I would call it a masterpiece of improvisation. I really don't think. I wouldn't call it a masterpiece of anything. It's built. It's basically a slightly more seaworthy version of what the Americans had been building for a long time by this point, if we consider the earliest vessel we talked about. Now, the interesting thing was, the battle starts off on the 8th of March with Virginia, aka Merrimack, destroying the sloop Cumberland, the 50-gun frigate Congress, and the frigate Minnesota runs aground. The reason she destroys these vessels is none of them managed to get going in time to get away. Because, and I say this with all the love in my heart for the Merrimack, but and this is a serious thing to me, the Virginia Merrimack, whatever you want to call it, is not exactly that fast. In fact, she tops out really at roughly, well, some people claim she could do 6 knots, but she never really clocked going faster than 5 knots. So, if you get caught by her, that's more a reflection of you as an officer than it is of her. I'm just going to put that out there. On the night of the 8th, the Monitor, under the command of a Lieutenant John Warden, arrives. And on the March the 9th, with crowds of Union and Confederate supporters watching from the decks of nearby vessels and shores on either side. So it's rather like, it's closer to the thriller in Manila than it is to a naval battle. It's honestly one of the few naval battles in history which actually was a spectator sport. If you think about it, how many naval battles are this well known and this much of a spectator sport? And basically, with Minnesota providing the bait, Virginia comes out to attack the Minnesota. And then the Monitor appears. And then they pass back and forth on opposite sides. Firing was completely ineffective. Both crews lacked training. Monitor could fire only once in 7 or 8 minutes. But for her own safety was actually faster and more maneuverable than a large opponent. Lucky for her. And basically they couldn't really do much to each other. Monitor's pilot house was hit at one point, which drove iron splinters into Warden's eyes. That's the officer in command. So she heads towards shallow waters because of this. Virginia concludes that Monitor's disabled, turns again to attack the Minnesota, but her officers had decided they had low ammunition, a leak in the bow, and difficulty keeping up steam. So she heads for Navy Yard, and the battle's over. It's one of those interesting points of history that after that point they just keep facing off against each other and never actually do anything. On May the 9th, 1862, following the Confederate evacuation of Norfolk, the Virginia is destroyed by its crew. Monitor, in turn, is lost in a gale off Cape Hatteras, North Carolina, in December the 31st, 1862. They are an indecisive battle. At this point, there is a strong argument by many that ships' weapons are no longer powerful to do enough damage to ships if, because they can't penetrate the armor, which arguably leads to this. Sure, supposedly Monitor withdrew first, but intended to come back. But by then, Virginia assumed they'd won and withdrawn too. Well, the thing is, they don't. Basically, they have steering difficulties, and as they're turning around to steer back, it takes them so long. Neither ship is particularly fast or great. Okay. Brent Bolus, what are any other hardwares useful for ship components? Oak and teak tend to be the main ones they'd like to go for. Anuk, wasn't Warrior being used as a fuel bunker when she was rediscovered? Yes, I think on the Falkland Islands or something. Teak. The Rozetsky class had a 230 millimeter belt on 50 millimeters teak, and the Tegenov's 280 millimeter belt on 80 millimeters teak. I guess our Dreadnoughts weren't much different. Teak was useful. Sorry. So Warspite should have pulled UST 28 and play hide and seek till hide and sink till long enough when people would want to save it. Potentially. I think that's what HMS Plymouth is trying, and I don't think it worked for her. Jones, I like when people ask me if HMS Warrior could win a fight with US Monitor, and I tend to say Warrior could just go a few miles offshore and wait for the Monitor to sink. Or, alternatively, she could just run rings around her, because the thing is, Monitor's turret doesn't actually turn that quickly, so honestly, Warrior could probably do a circle around her and catch up with the turret before it could reach her. Oh, no, sorry. If a battle like that happens in modern times, imagine all the selfies. The Battle of Salamis had spectators. Potentially, yes. Paul Berto, re-Wars, but I'm sure Narvik Council would have let her hide there for a few years. They probably would have done. They more than likely would have done. Anyway, so the Battle of Lisa. Now, of course, this is Tegetthoff's victory. It's a great victory of the Austro-Hungarians over the Italians. What's it a great victory for? Ramming! Because, of course, if you're going to take out your heavily armored opponent and your guns aren't going to work, you might as well ram them. Works especially well on unarmored ships. And helps when your Italian fleet you're facing off. Well, you see, I tend to be slightly nicer to the Italian admiral than some of my colleagues because I think he's given frankly an impossible task because he's given an impossible organization to run, an organization formed literally of people who had been mortal enemies for many years, most of whom disagree on doctrine, let alone tactics and signals command, and he's given literally days to put them into a fleet formation. It's just fun. And the Battle of Lisa turns into this heroic battles for all sides involved. And I'm fairly sure this painting is completely ahistorical. I do not think any admiral stands like that naturally in command of their ship. Especially not in the middle of a fighting zone with an idiot waving a sword around next to him. I'm fairly sure at a certain point, at least the arm would be reaching out going, "Give me that weapon!" and pull it back. You only draw swords when we're actually boarding something. And well away from my head. But the Battle of Lisa is this major battle. It's the first battle for years between fully worked up fleets, which is in comparatively open waters, which seems to offer all these lessons. And these lessons include forward firing guns and ramming as being critical abilities. And you can see the legacy of this is starting to build up to the Dreadnought, because remember, the Dreadnought, classic example is, why does she have wing turrets? To have the maximum number of guns firing forward. And now we have the Turbina. Turbina. A fun ship. A very fun little ship. Now, that is her going through a Spithead Naval Review at the top, which she wasn't invited to. And she was taken along there by Sir Charles Algernon Parsons, the gentleman who developed her and came up with her as an idea and turbines an idea, who is the gentleman off to the right. Now, this particular gentleman is one of the most amazing people from history. He assists his wife and daughter in founding the Female Engineers Society and pushing for that, which is still going today. He loses his son of fighting in World War One, sadly enough, but he's incredibly forward-thinking for engineering, and he of course starts off the Parsons turbines, which are what give HMS Dreadnought the power she has. And here's the thing: you can go and see the real Turbina. She is in Newcastle. If you go to Newcastle, if you go to the big Heritage Museum in Newcastle, you will find Turbina sitting in the hall. Now, these aren't the photos I've taken of her, because I swear the person who's taken of her was on a ladder, because having walked around that hall, the only way I could see you could get to that position is if you were on a ladder. But she is amazingly cool to walk around, and if you're very, very nice, they do let you even walk on board her. Although they won't allow you to take pictures of doing that because you're not supposed to. She has a three-stage axial flow direct acting Parsons steam turbine driving two 12-foot 6-inch outer shafts, each with three 18-inch diameter 460 millimeter 24-inch pitch propellers, and one inner shaft with 3 propellers. If you look at the picture down the bottom, in the center of the screen, you will see them. Those are what those propellers look like. 2,100 horsepower, able to produce 200 psi, or 200 psi to an extent, 170 psi at the turbine. Speed 34.5 knots. She's actually a very efficient ship. Yes, she did do that at a big fleet review. Basically, she turned up at the 1897 Spithead Review. And it's the Diamond Jubilee of Queen Victoria. It's being held in, with her in front of the Prince of Wales, foreign dignitaries, Lords of the Admiralties, and Lords of the Admiralty. And basically, Turbina turns up and races between the two lines of Navy ships and steams up and down in front of the crowd, the front of the crowd, and the princes and the princesses, and easily evades a Navy picket boat that's trying to pursue her. In fact, almost swamping that boat with her inner wake. She was photographed several times by the famous, at that time, cinematographer Alfred J. West, who's then invited by Sir Charles Parsons to film and photograph the vessel within the River Tyne and adjacent to North Sea. Those pictures are available. You can actually... there's a rumor that there is a copy of that video of that movie still going around somewhere you can actually get and watch. And I have been trying to track down a decent... I have found a couple which claim to be it, but they look more to me like they're stills from it, which are being put together, rather than the actual video. Or on the actual movie. Mainly because it all seems too clear. It seems like it's been artificially produced on a machine, if you know, digitally manipulated, than it is actually from that era. This demonstration of her abilities led to further trials, which were asked for by the Admiralty, unsurprisingly. And then the Royal Navy decides to produce two turbine-powered destroyers, HMS Viper and Cobra. Both vessels were lost to accidents in 1901, but the Admiralty was convinced by that point it didn't really bother them. They launched in 1899, they lost in 1901. They liked them. And the first turbine-powered merchant vessel, the Clyde steamer T.S. King Edward, was followed in 1901. Now, this is the interesting thing. Steam turbines, as they're produced, have a various history in terms of the turbines. And how do I put this? Parsons produce very specific turbine engines. They're very reliable engines. Britain is rather lucky, though, in that it quickly actually develops more than just Parsons. It also has Brown. Who also produce turbines. So they have two good supplying turbine companies competing, which accelerates forward the British development of turbines, something chronic. And broadly speaking, this is what you get for a turbine. You get jets of steam going in, driving around, and this is one form. There is another form of system where actually the jets, the nozzles, and that's the important thing. For a turbine, the important thing is the metallurgy and the shaping of the nozzles, because that's how you get the maximum efficiency and power out of the steam. You can either mount those nozzles on the rotating part itself and have them powering it, or you can mount them like this is, mounted in several banks around, to propel the blades of a propeller in many ways. It's in terms of Parsons turbines, the British tribal class destroyers tended to use, some of them use Parsons, some of them use Browns. The Canadian Navy and the Australian Navy all use Parsons. Most of the Royal Navy ones were Parsons, but I think one of them was a couple were Browns, from memory, or at least ended up being fitted with Browns by the time it was the end of World War II. Whilst early marine turbines drove their propellers directly, Parsons themselves end up developing helical reduction gearing for marine turbines, and by 1908 were using reduction gearing as well. Now, this allows for far more control of the power and also allows for far more efficiency when it comes to fuel. Because turbines get more efficient the more power you give them. But if you directly link your turbines to your propeller shafts, that means that you're always having to go over at high speed. Whereas if you have reduction gearing, you can have a single turbine churning along at fairly high power, but that can be powering more than one shaft if you set it up that way, i.e. as a la turbina. One of the interesting things also is that the Parsons company actually does survive as part of Siemens, still based in Heaton, Newcastle, at a far reduced site. Kevin Ray, when did underwater weapons like mines or torpedoes start to have an impact on ship design? Honestly, it's in the run-up to World War One they start to have more of an impact. Torpedoes are a theoretical thing, but don't really. You must remember, for quite a while, the torpedo is actually a mine. And it's a while before the Whitehead. It's only after the Whitehead torpedo really comes into service that people start thinking about torpedo design, and that's mainly to do with destroyers and their use against big ships. But mainly the response in big ships is to carry lots of fast, rapid-firing guns to try and put the destroyers down before they get within torpedo range. Cameron, I was always surprised Parsons wasn't prosecuted for his stunt at the Finetta Review. If he'd gone so slowly as to get caught, he would have been prosecuted. He went fast enough, he didn't. In which case... Mercy fraud. It's called a selfie stick. You hold it straight up and jump to get that shot. Well, I think that shot's directly from the website, so I think it's probably part of them. If an outboard motorboat had did that, you might have gotten outboard motor powered destroyers. I doubt it. That's the thing with film. It has amazing resolution and clarity. If the film was well cared for, there's no reason it shouldn't be as clear as a modern 1080p HP video. I agree, and I agree about the clarity. It's not that. It's let's put it this way: the video I've seen, which claims to be video, it has far too. The frame rate is wrong. That's all I'm going to say. The frame rate is wrong as far as I'm concerned. So, now, the thing is, I'm now jumping to 1891. Or am I jumping back to 1891? Considering Turbina is launched in 1894. But the thing is, you have to consider what battleships have got to at this point. And I made the point earlier that HMS Warrior is basically an armoured battery and engines with the normal hull tacked on. Here you go. Here's the Royal Sovereign class. No turrets. But they are in many ways an armoured battery. All the guns located in the centre, but the guns have reduced down. Not standardising on guns yet, but 4.5 batteries the same, and a mixed complement of guns. So it's, to an extent, I would say Sovereign is a halfway point between what you get with HMS Warrior and what you get with HMS Dreadnought. Another thing for me, reaction versus impulse engine turbines. True, but I was trying not to get too much in them because I'm fairly sure I'm going to have to do a video on reaction versus impulse turbines at some point. Cal Gasman, the Oliver has a Perry class has an outboard auxiliary engine. I seem to remember, isn't that kind of like a pod? Their auxiliary engine now. Hello, Dan Freeman. Had an exciting journey back from work. I'm sorry to hear that. Higher RPM doesn't necessarily mean high power, but the high RPM is very important to efficiency. And the direct coupled early turbines that could only turn under to 200 RPM had low efficiency because of it. Which means more, which it's going to sound strange. Efficiency affects fuel consumption, and especially once you get into oil-powered engines and turbines, with the ability, especially to do on the small tube boilers, the efficiency starts to really matter. Oswalski, what did Admiral Fisher say about Turbina in the Fleet Review trolling? He wanted to be on Turbina. Hey, James Hardley. Have you seen the RN's breach, RN Breach YouTube channel? His animations of the RN 15-inch guns working as a top class. Easily say the equal of Stefan Draminsky from the Anatomy of the Ship books. Cool, I haven't, but I'll have a look at it. John Evans, Hood's got turrets. Yes, but Hood is a slightly special one, and comes technically after what I'm going to talk about next. Vision, I would say Devastation is halfway to Dreadnought, with or at least 45%, with Roll 7 at 75%. The reason I would say Devastation isn't halfway to Dreadnought, and I have this reasoning. Okay. So, I would say Devastation is one of the ideas. It's kind of like the pre-Warrior concept, where the Royal Navy's testing out those ideas. It's like Lars says, the French go, we got here first, but actually, you can find all those individual ideas have been tested out on various RN ships already by this point. Have either been built for Britain or for someone else as well. Whereas Warrior brings it all together. I would argue Devastation is testing out ideas, but I would argue she's not bringing it together. Whereas I would argue Royal Sovereign is actually on the way, is actually a proper functioning warship, for starters, for her period, and is bringing a lot of those ideas together. So I would say she's at the halfway point. And considering turbines come in after and various other things come in on the way, I'd say it's 1891, and we are now starting to get to the point where Dreadnought's going to come to be. And that's the interesting thing, because you can put forward the case that the RN could have built a version of Dreadnought in the 1890s. They could have done. And I am 100% of the belief that if Fisher's mentor, who died, who we talked about in the Fisher video quite a lot, good. It's good. Sorry, I keep wanting to call him Goodwood, and I know that's wrong. Mm-hmm. Good enough. Yes, good enough. I have a feeling if Admiral Goodenough had, if Captain Goodenough had gone on to become Admiral Goodenough and First Sea Lord, the Royal Navy would have probably produced something in about the 1890s, which would have been an all big gun battleship. I'm not sure whether it would have had, it wouldn't have had probably the big guns of Dreadnought, but it would have been an all big gun ship and would have probably had more than 2 turrets of principal guns, probably at least 4. Might have even had them super firing, because believe it or not, there were papers considering that as early as 1890s. But it requires someone who is prepared to bring a lot of things together. As it was, someone pointed out to me, hang on, no, the Royal Sovereigns don't have, it's HMS Hood that brings in the turrets. And, well, here is Barfleur from 1892. She is a Centurion class. Her sister ship, Centurion, is the leadership of the class. And again, you can start to see there is a theme developing here in terms of the armor. And these are, again, quite capable pre-dreadnoughts. They're certainly not ships I would like to pick a fight with if I wanted one. At the time, there aren't many ships which can match up against HMS Barfleur. There aren't many which would want to. Trentalanka, oil has a higher density, energy density, plus more efficient, and storage and automated transfer. Liquid fuel is a more storage efficient. Yeah, it is. 9600. Oh, the efficiency, well before it began to matter. Pretty much. That's the point with turbines. John Burrow, Royal Sovereign would be a very early pre-Dreadnought. Pretty much Royal Sovereign is the very, very early pre-Dreadnought. It's the first sort of class of pre-Dreadnoughts, you can almost argue. Cunningham, sorry to jump ahead, but do you think the next evolution of warship propulsion will be similar to Queen Mary's 2 Star Drypods? Again, I think I've been saying this on Bilge Pumps for a while. I do, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Type 83s do have dry pods. Vision, I would agree that Warrior, Royal Sovereign, and Dreadnought were big leaps that brought ideas and tech together and set the standard for what followed. Still, Devastation and Thunderer were skipped. That's because me and me and a particular Royal Navy captain do not go well together in the same video. Royal Navy Sovereign's next ship had a worse life than her pre-Dreadnought. They are white designs, yes, as is Barfleur. So you could call pre-Dreadnoughts, in a way, you could call them white-style battleships. Hello, Cicadius. Hope to tour Warrior next spring. You'll be very lucky. It's a wonderful thing to tour around, and Warrior is an excellent ship to go around. I can never say enough about how friendly and nice Warrior and the people who look after her are. Greeting. Hood proved the Cole's turret dead against Brevets. Yes. Well, Barfleur proves some turrets are good ideas, and the reason I've brought up Barfleur rather than Centurion is because of her career. Barfleur is commissioned in June 1894 and then immediately assigned to the reserve fleet. This is not unusual. Imagine that. Having sufficient forces that you can assign brand new ships to your reserve fleet as soon as they're built. It's amazing. Considering the topic of conversation we were having today in the bilge pumps, it's a very interesting idea. She cost £533,666. So a little over $500,000. We're gonna go back to her because we'll get on. I'll get on with these in a second. Now, she then goes to the Mediterranean for service there, and she's on station, a British ship on station at Crete when the Greek uprising against the Ottoman Empire begins in 1897. In February 1897, she puts a landing party ashore at Candia, now known as Heraclin, during a riot in order to restore order and bring British subjects aboard the Barfleur for their safety. She then became part of the International Squadron, which was a multinational force made up of warships of the Austro-Hungarian Navy, the French Navy, the Imperial German Navy, the Regia Marina, and the Imperial Russian Navy, which intervened in the uprising to bring fighting to a halt by bombarding Cretan insurgents, putting sailors and marines ashore, and blockading Crete and key ports in Greece. She then went to the Far East and arrived at Singapore in 1898. From there, she accompanied the destroyers HMS Fame and HMS Whiting to Hong Kong, where she joined the China station. In 1898, she became further on in 1898, this is October, she became the flagship of the station's second in command, Rear Admiral Charles Fitzgerald. Now, here is the interesting thing. During the Boxer Rebellion, the ship put landing parties ashore, which joined other forces in storming the Taco forts in June 1900, and relieving the foreign legations in Tientsin in July 1900. Commander David Beatty was serving aboard Barfleur when he was wounded at Tientsin during operations ashore. And that's where he makes his name. So, if any ship in the Royal Navy has to bear the blame for getting Admiral Beatty to where he got to, it's quite possibly Barfleur. I'm sorry. Poor vessel. She was eventually sold in 1910 for a scrap of £26,500. But on her way to the scrapyard, she didn't seem to want to go, and she got jammed between the piers of the swing bridge at Newcastle upon Tyne while under tow. This meant that the bridge could not close and blocked all road traffic until she could be freed. So she quite literally stopped traffic. An honourable mention of the Brandenburg class and to the Ironborough funds. Thank you. Vision, I want to know more about your beef with our N4 Striper. There are many, but also there's the fact that I think white battleships and it's one of the things I would like to get there, because I would call them the white style battleships for a reason, not the pre-dreadnoughts. And I've realized that in YouTube terms videos, I've kept calling them the pre-dreadnoughts because that is what everyone else calls them to make it easier for the listeners. But as a rule, if I was talking to my students, I would encourage them to call them the white style battleships, because I do put it down to the Royal Sovereign. I see that as the benchmark, and I see the various white battleships as the benchmark for the pre-dreadnought era. And they set the mold. There are other navies and other ships you can sort of claim to and put to it, but none really builds as many or puts as much of a stamp on it as white does. And I don't like the idea of calling things pre-dreadnought and dreadnought, because when you're building a Royal Sovereign, you don't know dreadnoughts coming out. So you're not building a pre-dreadnought. You're building a battleship. So I consider pre-dreadnought and dreadnought to be a very... I agree with dreadnought-style battleships, but I consider pre-dreadnought to be a very lazy designation. It's a very... oh... we can't be bothered to think about this. We decided all the battleships after this point are called dreadnought-style battleships. They're built to this style. And then we're going to call these ships semi-dreadnoughts because they're not quite dreadnoughts. But not quite. They're not like the other ones. And the other ones we're going to call pre-dreadnoughts, which is very reductionist and null and lazy. So, white-style battleships. Seneca, Barfleur probably still gets bullied in heaven by battle cruisers lost to Jutland. I'm pretty sure she does. It's your fault. I'm sorry, it wasn't my choice. He was assigned to me. Stop beating me. 96 the next Centurion was the King George V Dreadnought that meets her end as a breakwater of Normandy in World War II. Yeah. Trentlenko, Dreadnought as a label is like 5th generation fighter is today. Perhaps. Jack Ray, pre-Dreadnought is ex post facto. Yes. Well, I would always go ad hoc ergo proctor hoc after therefore before, which is one of those legal fallacies and philosophical fallacies, and it's just not the case. And I thought I would bring in this because it's a factor in Dreadnought coming to appearance, because in 1899, this is the Suffren, which the French are building. And this is the Kaiser Karl the Gross, which is one of several White Star Germanic White Star battleships the Germans are building. And this is really a point at which the British start to realize that the French aren't the things they're building against. And yes, the German ship is armed with the 11-inch guns. And yes, the French ship is armed with 12. But the German ship has 6 11-inch guns. The French has 4 12s. The German ship has, as its secondary gun, 3.4-inch weapons, which are interesting. The French is crammed with 6.5s. Ultimately, though, which one is more powerful a warship? Well, here's the thing. This ship looks powerful on paper, and it looks powerful to civilians who are thinking it's bristling with guns. But if you're a naval officer, and you're looking at the ships, and you're going, that's got 6 11-inch guns. That becomes problematic very quickly. 90 Karen, HMS Barfleur ends her name's run as a battle class destroyer. Ironic or what? It is quite a shame in ways. But she's a good battle class destroyer. And it's interesting to note that she's not one of the names drawn out for a Dreadnought during the massive build-up. Whereas if you think about it, Centurion is a King George V class battleship. And was actually supposed to be a 9,000-ton cruiser for the Royal Navy, planned in 1945. There is a small artillery barrage going on over my head. I do apologize for anyone who's listening to that. They're having fun. They are. Good old Guy Fawkes. Guy Fawkes name. That's not very interesting. I believe Chris Parry said recently that he expects a Dreadnought moment in the next decades. Thoughts? Or is it a topic for Bill Trump? I'll get to it at the end. But I will get to it. I'll talk about it at the end. It is something we're talking about in bilge pumps to extent today. I'm not... How can I put this politely? I think people can look back at the Dreadnought and it looks like a bigger thing than it is. And I'm going to explain why that is once we get to there. As we get to it. And then I'm going to explain what a Dreadnought moment really is. 9600. Centurion was one of the Minotaur class cruisers. Potentially, yes. Jonas, you can see why pre-Dreadnought made sense for navies talking about their inventory at the time. You can, but they didn't really talk about them like that. That's really range, fire control. Honestly, again, the Germans probably have it over the French, but the fire control for neither is that great. Again, the reason why the Germans have it over the French is if you check it out, 2 of their guns are actually on the same level. Whereas I don't think the French have a gun on the same, a single pair of guns. Oh well, they're all matched up with the opposite side. I don't think more than 2 of the 6. In terms of the main guns, they're definitely not on the same level. And the 6.5s, well, the casemate ones are interesting. I know. So, I'm going to start off with the Devonshire class armored cruiser. 1903, HMS Antrim, the first of the class built. Look at her front. Look at it really closely. Really, really closely. And tell me something. Does it look familiar to you? Because there aren't many people in this world who will have studied the Devonshire class armoured cruiser that closely, unless you're particularly interested in armoured cruisers. If you are, you will have probably studied her quite closely. And consider it. You have a gun centerline forward, raised up, and then 2 wing turrets to maximize your firing forward. Oh, and you have guns of a similar level aft. She looks interesting, doesn't she? Adoski, 3 main gun turrets, 6 guns. That looks really good. That really looks good for a pre-Dreadnought. Colin Cameron, the most important part of the German ship looks like a stable gun platform. It was. Take care, John Evans. Colin goes again. Is it correct to presume that 3 Sufferans versus 4 Brandenburgs is the roughly tonnage cost manpower equivalent? Roughly. 1904, a Neptune class cruiser and a 1947 Minotaur class. Sorry, to sum up the video, the natural evolution of Dreadnought. Pretty much. The point I'm making is that we talk about the pre-Dreadnought battleships, and everyone will look at the line of them and go, ooh, Dreadnought seems to come from nowhere. And the point is, and the point I'm trying to make, is that actually it doesn't come from nowhere. And I know I have said this a few times before, but I'm going to be really making the case for this. It's not the battleship line which is developing. You know, if we go to what's being built in 1903 at the same time as this vessel, you're looking at the Swifter class. And let me just get my picture up of the Swifter class, because I was going to add this in as a slide, but then I thought I'll add it in as a separate picture to talk about. There we go. This is the Swifter class. Now, that does look pretty Dreadnoughty, but this looks pretty Dreadnoughty to me. And that's the point I'm trying to make here. Especially if I do this. And there's a reason for that. Because at this point, the range of guns are still that the battleship is expected to close and basically blast each other to pieces. But the cruisers, they're going to be exchanging and possibly engaging targets at high speed at range. The cruiser battle is going to be a battle of maneuver, a battle of distance. So they're standardizing on guns, they're standardizing on positions, and in many ways they're having to think far more about fields of fire. And that's your major advantage of turrets over casemates. It's the field of fire. Because let's be honest, a casemate tends to be, the number of guns, etc., can be actually lighter than a turret. But a turret gives you a better field of fire. It allows you to engage a wider range of targets, which is something you need to worry about more at long range than at short range. Because at short range, they're probably going to be within your target sphere and your line of sight. It's only at long range that they might not be. Even at medium range, they might not be. Oswalski, that's funny. Germany and France at the time that had both battleships named after the same person. It's the Kaiser, the Karl de Gross, and Charlemagne. Yep. The most scary experience I have had was working in a petrol station on Bonfire Night. We're a big open space, so all the houses angle their rockets above us. Oh, good luck. It's a mini Dreadnought from John Shane X-Ray, Lionheart X-Ray. Yep. Andrew, would cars at Karl de Gross better classes having a 411-inch main battery and a 211 secondary battery because the difference in length and middle element? To an extent, yes, but they have it. And now I have it for your example. So here is the next class after that class of armored cruiser. It's Duke of Edinburgh, and this is actually HMS Black Prince. Compare that directly across to HMS Dreadnought and to HMS Swifter. Dreadnought is a scaled up version of an armored cruiser. This is the point. She doesn't come from nowhere. This idea of a Dreadnought coming from nowhere, of Dreadnought coming from suddenly appearing and there's a Dreadnought moment, is wrong. There are so many different parts leading up to her. And most importantly, are these ships. But the trouble is people look at them and they go, oh, they're armored cruisers. They're not a battleship. So they're looking at this. And compared to this, yes, she is a massive jump. The Lord Nelsons are still in construction when Dreadnought's being built. So this is the preceding class of battleship, really. So if you're comparing this to the Far ship, yes, there's a difference. That's a Dreadnought moment for you. But when you're comparing Dreadnought to Black Prince, Dreadnought's a scaled up version of the Black Prince. No, right. If the difference here makes sense, Dreadnought, people look back at her as something more than she is, or as something more than she was. The thing is, Dreadnought is... she's a mark in the sand. She's a line drawn. She says that the world has changed. She said it, but she's like HMS Warrior. And that's the point. You either have to look back at HMS Warrior and say her and Dreadnought are the same, and it's a Warrior moment like it's a Dreadnought moment, or you have to not. Because Dreadnought is a big thing. But the point is, she's the coming together of turbine technology. She's the coming together of ship design. She's the coming together of gun technology, range finding. All these things together to build that. If she had been powered by triple expansion engines, she probably would have had far more stacks. But she could, with turbines, she could produce necessary power without having to be multi-stacked. So she only has 2 funnels. Otherwise, she could possibly have had 3 funnels. But that's the point. In many ways, she is taking the hull and design and you can even look at the bow. Look at the bow shaping. Look at the way the hull flares. Look at all the design shaping. Dreadnought is a scaled up armored cruiser. And that is the point. That is the way Fisher managed to build her so fast. If Fisher had been starting from nothing and a blank slate, it would have taken far longer. You cannot pull off a Dreadnought style build if you are starting from nowhere. And there's nothing wrong with that. That doesn't make Dreadnought any less amazing or any less capable or anything less defining than she was. She is. But it's omitting that there's a history. So it's when Chris Parry says there's a Dreadnought-like moment coming up, Chris Parry is taken as meaning that in a way that there is going to be a completely unforeseen change and suddenly something's going to set the world on fire. It's not. That's unlikely to happen. What is likely to happen is there are likely to be little bits going on there, and the big defining thing is when someone pulls it all together. That's going to be the question. Who pulls it all together first? But there are going to be little bits everywhere. And I'll expand this so you can get a good look at it. And look, it's kind of like looking at, and I will give the example I usually give. If you look at any modern branded car company, their car designs tend to look like scaled versions of each other, especially Volvo is guilty of this. They look like they've got the same shaping for everything, and everything's just a bigger or smaller version of it. I think a firework just landed outside. That's exactly what we're talking about when we're talking about Dreadnought. We're talking about someone scaling something up. As I see, so your point is that components for Dreadnought were already there, and Fisher just combined them all together. Pretty much. James Hamby, the Marine Nationale seems to have an obsession with mounting triplex or duplex rangefinder systems on all its battleships. They have many obsessions, none of them all that good. Gun Cameron, so Dreadnought is a scaled up Antrim with majestic guns and fire control. I would say she's more a scaled up Duke of Edinburgh, but yes. Arguably, with a Nelson, Lord Nelson class fire control, guns and fire control. He takes, because this is an example. Again, if we go back to this point, Dreadnought is built with 12-inch guns. As I said before, one of the other options available from EOC was a 14-inch gun, which if he'd been doing normal standing, he could have gone for. But it was important Britain built Dreadnought quickly and had her available. What does he have under construction? Well, he has the Lord Nelsons, which have 12-inch guns being built for them. And yes, the Swifter class have 10-inch guns, but he has 12-inch guns being built for him on the Lord Nelsons, so he uses those. Excuse me, I'm just going to check the firework that landed literally outside my door. I heard it flump into the door. Oh, sorry, we have a new neighbour who lives that way, who doesn't seem to be able to actually use their fireworks properly. Oh, well, I will deal with that in the morning. I just had to put one out with a watering can. So the Dreadnought's development line came more from armored cruisers than from battleship development. Yes. Because if you talk about the armored cruisers, and this is the point you have to consider when you're talking about the Duke of Edinburgh class. They are armed, so much as it was, with 6 9.2-inch guns in single turrets. 6 single turrets. They then have 10 single 6-inch guns, which is why people then go, oh, well, this is not a development of Dreadnought. But when you look at their design, and you look at what they're built to do and how they're shaped, they are actually very much a similarity. In fact, if I change Swifter to the other picture I have of HMS Black Prince, there we go. Look at the shaping of the bridge structure. Look at the shaping and positioning of the masts. Look at the shaping and positioning of all the superstructure. Look at the shaping and positioning of the guns, of the hull. And I don't claim to be revolutionary. There have been other historians who have talked about this before. It's just they seem to get ignored in favour of the people who want to just put forward Dreadnought is this massive revolution, which comes from nowhere. It doesn't come from nowhere. It only comes from nowhere if you treat battleships as an isolated area. Battleships aren't isolated. Neither are, cruisers or any other part of naval ship design. They're all put together. They're all connected. I'm not certain that's correct. The number of stacks won't have to do with the difference between triple expansion or reciprocating versus turbine engines. They're an excellent. These are an excellent comparison. Both 23,000 shaft horsepower. The reason I was told, and I've looked, the reason I've read, and I've been told by other people who've looked into this, is she would have had to have 3 or possibly 4 stacks if she was triple expansion engine, is because of the layout you'd have had to do with the boilers to get the engines to work, because actually the turbines are denser in terms of their power layout. I'm not the naval architect, but my dad always maintained that, and the books I've read that were his books seem to suggest that, and they are mostly the naval architect, the Institute of Naval Architects papers, which were looking at various options from the written in the 1910s. Dang launched in 1904, but Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark wasn't even conceived until 1920. I know. There were Dukes of Edinburghs before Prince Philip. Sadly enough. None as good, though. John Shea, so Dreadnought is an odd mix between battleship, battlecruiser, and large armor cruiser, right? To an extent. So you can almost say that the battlecruiser line is more a logical development of the origins of the Dreadnought than the battleship line. Nowzaski, considering the Dreadnought is supposed to reach higher speed, using cruiser hull design as a basis is a really good idea. Yes, it makes sense. There is nothing illogical about this. And then, of course, we had the Battle of Tsushima, which shows the firepower you can achieve, the concentration you can achieve with long-range firepower. One of the interesting things I love about the paintings of the Battle of Tsushima is they don't show the enemy fleet. Because it takes place at such ranges, the artists can't, unless they are painting such a scale people can't see, they can't paint the fleet seeing each other and engaging. Because they're really not at the point at which they're visible. Doggies are handling the fireworks fine, according to my sister. But I will be. I'm not planning on this going past 9:30 this evening because I have to go in for the dogs. Make sure they get to bed and are happy before they go to bed. No, I'm not certain. I've answered that one. Colin Cameron, Iron has always looked at successful designs and scaled them up, as happened with Victory being the basis for larger first rates going forward. True. Sam Thompson, wing turrets for 11-inch and larger guns seems a bit crazy. Centerline just makes sense. Well, wing turrets are throwback. How much head-on and running away battle did they expect? They expected a lot. Remember, this was the legacy of the battle Lisa. And the key thing that Fisher wanted was 6 guns firing forward. Because he thought with 6 guns firing forward, you would achieve 3 hits in any minute. So you would have a 12-inch shell landing on an enemy battleship every 20 seconds. Which means he thinks that will be enough to keep them under, destroy an enemy ship and keep them under control. And crucially, he points out, compared to most enemy ships, that would be a lot more firepower than they could take, because they would have to turn broadside on, which means they'd have to present you a far bigger target to be able to bring both turrets to bear, and still wouldn't have the firepower to match your single Dreadnought. Now, interesting enough, this is the interesting thing. He does remark later on that if he'd had super firing, if he considered super firing as in was an option, he wouldn't have got rid of the wing turrets. He would have had an extra turret, because then he could have had an extra shell landing every minute in his mind, which would have made for 4 shells hitting the target every minute in any minute, which to his mind would have been absolutely amazing. May 1640. The difference between being that Black Prince had 26 boilers to achieve that power, while Dreadnought only had 18. I wonder if Black Prince has her boilers divided into a greater number of compartments. To an extent, yes, but also to an extent, there are slightly to an extent greater number of compartments, but also they have. This is going to sound strange. It's the way they have to be structured around the vertical triple expansion in the hull, and to feed the power into it. The way you can feed the power into the turbines, and the reason Fisher really pushes forward and gets turbines, and even this is despite people telling him no, you shouldn't, is because of the power density he can bring about and the way he can structure it inside the hull. And that's where he makes the case. Jonathan Burrows, so the battleships die, as it were, with the Dreadnought, and the armored cruisers grew massive. Armored cruisers are split off into 2 groups. One group going for slightly slower speed but more armor, becoming known as Dreadnought battleships, and one group carrying on the cruiser legacy and becoming battle cruisers, when in fact they should have really been called frigates or large armored cruisers. Con Cameron, you could also call the race-built galleon a Dreadnought moment, as it is a conglomeration of hull design and gun design with iron manufacturing. True. Hello, Dylan Leah. Wait patiently for Alex to get the second half of the message. I did. Eventually. I'll brain him later. I won't. Don't worry, everyone. Oswilski, what would have Admiral Fisher said about Yamato, Ayar, and Niccolo? I think Regolo would have been his favourite because high speed and 8-inch gun forward. I think he would have liked Ricklo. I think he would have. Phil Williams, hi Dr. Clarke. My dog is under the table. It's in her safe space. Yeah, that's good. And here you go. Here is Dreadnought in all her glory. Sam Thompson, I see how a Trafalgar Corps happened. Regarding how many guns? More. Potentially. John Burrow, fluffy research assistants need cuddles. Mm-hmm. I really wish our neighbour would get his angling right, because he's firing them straight over out of his garden into our garden, the fireworks, and straight into a bridle path, which is next to me. I think I'm going to be hosing the roof of our office later, just to make sure it's nice and wet, just in case there's anything up there smouldering. It is fireproof technically up there, but I prefer not to have firework up there. Jack Ray, well, World War I dugout experience over there. It certainly is fun. Mainly because, again, they're not able to do their aiming. This is my main problem with fireworks in UK, and I'm sorry to go off on one, but the main problem I have with it is that I love fireworks, but I have, thanks to all the stuff and random things I've done in my life, quite some experience in terms of using explosives and all these things, and knowing how to safely manage them. Kind of like Drac. Both of us are quite multifaceted in our lives. And yes, some of the people you see using fireworks, you're going, really? Senator, if you gave Dreadnought power plant a modern ship with the same space and weight allocated, what speeds would it reach? You would probably be talking 30-something knots. Because if you put in gas turbines into that ship, you would be having a whale of a time. Ooh, they're talking about fluffs. I think someone's coming to visit. Hello, Mighty Fluff. How are you doing? You coming in?
I'm not happy.
Hello. You're not happy with fireworks?
No?
Do you want me to go tell the neighbours off?
Yes.
Okay.
If they want to waste their money, they can always buy me antler bones. They will go, they will take less time to
be fair, he prefers ostrich bones to antler bones.
antler bones go quicker.
Although we don't tell Jamie that because and you lot don't tell Jamie that because Jamie will worry where the ostriches are going. And also, we'll be revealing to the Australians that is actually a weapon that could win their war versus the emus. Corgis. We would win. We would win.
We were just a bit concerned about the neighbour's shed. Well, I'm more concerned that it might burn down and then come over to our garden.
Right. Hello. Funny situation. It's not fireproof. It's fire resistant. Yes, it's not fireproof. It is fire resistant, and that is a different thing. And we keep being hit on the head by fireworks. I should just point on this at the top of the shed, so I'll be hosing it after I finish tonight.
Oh, great!
Yeah.
There you go. Some buildings will be paid for by you.
Right then. What's the questions? Okay. Ooh. Yes, this is the fluffy. This is the youngest fluffy research assistant. This is the Tafra. Hello, everyone. And not enjoying fireworks, are we?
Yeah, and I've also got toothache from head crying.
Oh, good lord. So, right. Right, giving the 1906 HMS Dreadnought the 203X HMS Dread's nuclear power propulsion. No one would want to see HMS Dreadnought given nuclear power propulsion. The speed that thing could get up to would be worrying. Remember, this is a vessel built to armored cruiser standards. But it is the new neighbours. If you didn't guess, that was my sister just coming randomly in, but she was worried about the dog being nervous, so apparently being sent to me is good for the doggy. Tianwong, I call them Generation 1, Generation 2, and Generation 3 battleships. I wouldn't get burnt alive. I would carry the burning building to their house. Oh. Gagsowski, makes sense why there are corgis in the Palisade. Keeps Her Majesty safe from the emus. Yes. Keeps her safe from also the kangaroo assassins, because I'm fairly sure they take out the kangaroos. Oswelski, the biggest one researcher is the Bobby Yamato. Oh, God, Howard. Now, the thing I want to point out to is that this design, especially the top, illustrates most clearly that Dreadnought is this culmination of lots of strands of design. She's the armored cruiser hull as it's developed. And layout. Because let's consider the guns. And especially if we look to the German guns with their hexagonal gun layout, that's really armored cruiser. That is the exact gun layout of this ship. Now, Dreadnought, because they can get 5 turrets built in time, rather than 6, goes for this sort of centerline aft one. And again, talking to when Jackie Fisher starts talking about the idea of making them super firing, etc., and all those things, can get really infused. But it means she has 6 guns firing forward, 6 guns firing aft, and has a broadside of 8 guns out of 10 guns. No, 640. A single LM2500 gas turbine of the more recent variety is capable of providing approximately double the installed power of HMS Dreadnought with the gas generator weighing perhaps just 3.2 tons. Yes. 9600, I might spill the beans to armored carriers. I will know. So. And all this is bringing up the steam engines have been refined and have come forward. Also, the thing about HMS Dreadnought, and I would say the big thing about her, is building her admits that you're not going to have a Trafalgar. I.e., battles are not going to be close quarters. And that's the big point about her. Dreadnought is not the design stuff, and that's the trouble. When we focus in on Dreadnought, so often with historians, especially ones who are not naval historians, who are political historians or economic historians, who are just using her as an illustrative event, think of her as a technological change. And really, she isn't, because the technology has all been coming through different areas and different things, and has already been around. It's just bringing it together that's different. What is different about Dreadnought is admitting that battles are not going to be the same. And people have been saying Chris Parry as talking about a Dreadnought style moment. Well, I would say the Dreadnought style moment we've got coming up is probably when someone introduces a large cruiser style vessel. Honestly, we're talking several tens of thousands of tons, probably about 23 to 25,000 tons, maybe a bit more, armed with hypersonic missiles and large amounts of other VLS. The ability from those hypersonic tubes to perhaps launch microsatellites if it needs to, or other means to launch UAV and recover UAVs and act as a mothership if it needs to. And to do all the things it needs to do as part of a task group. Now, the interesting thing is when you start to get into it, and sorry I went quiet there, I was listening to the fireworks and watching them come straight at my window, on my door. The interesting thing is when you start looking at those things, when you start talking about them and thinking about them, quite a lot of people then react by going, and that will see the end of the aircraft carrier. And I go, why? And here is the point. The aircraft carrier exists to launch aircraft. As long as you need long-range aircraft, you're going to need an aircraft carrier type vessel. And the reason you're going to need that is because you're going to need the runway. Because, and I hate to point this out to people, vertical launch, as great as it is, uses a lot of fuel versus a different form of takeoff, versus a rolling takeoff. Even a Queen Elizabeth style takeoff, it uses a lot less fuel than a vertical takeoff. So you're going to need that. What's going to be different, perhaps, is the escorts. And I see this potentially becoming you having this larger battle escort, which is probably crewed and has all those facilities on it. And then we'll have a flotilla of uncrewed escorts, which it will support, and its crew will carry out the maintenance and the support of. And then a carrier will slot into that task group as part of as it forming a battle group. And you might have 2 or 3 of those ships come together with a carrier and all their uncrewed ships, and that becomes your task force. Probably with submarines as well. Again, teaming crewed and uncrewed submarines. By the way, just in case this comes up at any point later, I've now almost had my window shoved in 5 times by fireworks launched from the property, which is number 4 on my road. Number 4, number 4, number 6. So just in case, okay. I'm sorry to introduce that into the chat, but I'm just watching them coming straight towards my head. Do you still have the helmet? Actually, I do still have the helmet, and I have the proper hat for the helmet. So yes, I do think that is going on now. I think you have a very smart idea, Jack Gray. I'm putting on the helmet. Fucking hell. Nice shot! You hit my door! Where's my hat? I have got my hat for it, but yeah, I'll find it in a second. Oh, but no, it's interesting. Certainly is not what I expected this week. Alzaski, that sounds like Kirov 2.0. It is to an extent Kirov 2.0, because Kirov was in many ways an idea ahead of its time. And again, that the thing is, when you start expecting these things to be a revolutionary idea that are epoch changing and they happen, they're not quite the same as that. They have a level. Yeah, well, we'll wait while you go speaking about ceasing the firebombing and the torture of the FRA and the TAFRAs. Well, this is the point again. We have about 6 big public firework displays in our area. Why they're doing them in their garden, I'm not quite sure. Sam Thompson, Dr. Clarke, sitting in an armoured conning tower. Maybe not as useless as most Iron officers thought when dealing with a gunpowder plot celebration. Potentially. You think it's the French, Rick Masava. I think it's more likely the Italians, after I didn't put in Cuniberti into this particular live. John Shea, I wouldn't be surprised if someone makes a cruiser at 73 to 80,000 tons. They might end up there, but the first ones will be about 23,000 tons. Rather like, again, Dreadnought. Sometimes I was driving through a German village in New Year's Eve 1990 and felt like I was in a Lancaster with all the rockets screaming by my American car. At this point, they are aiming for your door. Perhaps. No, if I'm calling Drac over, I'm getting him to bring his full body, his full armor. I'd have been over there already, and one of those launched up. I just contented myself with shouting a bit. Andrew, this is why I'm so glad I'm so glad that only the fire department or professionals hired by the fire department are allowed to do have fireworks in my city. Yeah, that sounds like a good idea to me. Oh. Anyway, so questions. Did we enjoy it? And also, I've got to make an announcement while I'm live today. And the announcement is the winners of the Patreon vote. And the winners of the Patreon vote are... Calvin Gasberg's repair ships from the age of sail through, if any, through steam and steel that can capture the USS Vulcan AR-5 to the future. And Wayne Boreans evaluating the Royal Navy, Royal Australian Navy, and Royal Canadian Navy Type 26 frigates against World War II ship classes. What are they now, and how does this fit their Navy's history? That's going to be cool. I'm slightly surprised that the construction and career of HMS Africa has got only 7 votes so far. I have to admit, I thought that would get slightly more. Admiral Sir Sidney Smith only got 8 votes so far. And the votes for Lister and Boyd, and why did they move to Admiralty desk jobs, has only got 10 votes so far. So there are still votes time. There's 21 hours left to vote. And 62 votes cast. And seeing as I have 91 patrons, and each of you is able to vote 3 times, there's a theoretical total of 273 votes able to be cast. And so, yeah, 211 more votes can be cast. All could be changed. Minnesota, we don't know why, but it's worth the 5 minutes it costs for us to, if you're going to speak to them and call the authorities if it continues. It'll be fine. If they cause any more trouble, then I will probably have to go somewhere. But at the moment, it's looking like they've calmed down a bit. Take care, Lewis Frank. Thank you for being here. And as you can see, 11th of November is the 81st anniversary of the Battle of Taranto. I expect there to be more Taranto-themed videos coming out in between. And, yeah. There will be more coming out. The 9th of October and November will no longer be the Royal Navy Monitors. That's been moved to December because I haven't been able to go CM33 yet. Still working that one out with Portsmouth. So that one's going to also become Taranto-themed. And we've got Sherman's March to the Sea coming up. And we've got the sinking of HMS Rawalpindi. And the Battle of Trafalgar. Now, and I have to admit, the Battle of Mayamang is coming soon. Unfortunately, I have listened through it, and honestly, I mangle the names so much that I'm not put it out. Doesn't matter. Odds alcohol is involved. Very high. Very high. Azoski, the Battle of Trafalgar, that's where a bunch of US cruisers decided to become HMS Eskimo. Pretty much. I thought it would be a good, particularly fun one to do. And it's a particularly fun story. Thank you, Trentalenko. Something IGN inbound your way. Yeah, keep a fire extinguisher at hand. Yes, that is the other thing. If we do finish with questions quickly, I will let's put it this way. I will say I will answer questions for at least another 5 minutes because I'm sure you have some more questions left, and then I will have to go and get the hose out and hose down the roof of my office because there is a distinct smell of smoke coming up from above my head. No fire, according to the camera I've got on it, but it's a distinctly smoky smell. Kerry, thanks, Dr. Clarke. This was your first stream of multiple plot lines. Naval history and arson. Not just arson. Arson by high explosive. Is it even multiple plot lines? After all, it's what navies have been doing for over 100 years. Guy, stop living in a bloody city. I don't live in a city. I live in Epsom in Surrey. I'm in the country suburbia. To be fair, in Cornwall, my cousins are probably having more fun because they probably are, you know, miles away from anyone. Come, ignore us and get that hose. Go and hose it unless you have IR cameras. Carl, I'm a paranoid naval historian who spends half my life doing random stuff with the various armed forces. You think I don't have infrared cameras around my property? Ring cameras provide the color variety. Who knows what provides the infrared ones? Very appropriate, Graham. Sheesh, Stafford, that's a massive growth. And I'd say, should the next US Navy repair and salvage ship class be named after US vessel? It could be quite cool. Oh, and I haven't mentioned it today, but as always, I have currently, as you know, in a competition with my aunt, and it's for a very nice bet. It's familial bragging rights and a picture of them wearing Blackburn face masks. And to win it, I need to get to 13,000 subscribers by December the 31st, 2021. And if I do, then she takes the photo. If I don't, I don't. And I'm currently at 6,937, so please help, because it's all down to you if I get there. And I will probably do this as a long patrol as well. It come out at some point. Because I think it's been interesting enough for everyone that this is a long patrol. Okay. I will be going to check the roof very shortly. Andreas Glad, move further from suburbia, 100 meters between houses at least. That is my plan once I get enough funding. Why did he pick 13,000 by 31st of the 12th? She said I had to double my subscribers, and at the time I had roughly 6,500. Just below 6,500. And I rounded it up and said, "Oh, are you sure, Auntie? That's 13,000 subscribers." She said, "That's perfect. By December 31st, the numbers make symmetry." No, Safford, you do great. Don't worry about it. No, sorry. Couldn't you have chosen a lower number or longer time? Not in my family. We go big or go home. And what do you think about the Blackburn Firebrand? I like it. As I've said before, I like the Blackburn Firebrand. I think if it had been built when ordered, with the engine it was originally ordered with, which was the Napier Sabre, which was ordered by the Royal Navy for their needs, and then was taken up by the Royal Air Force and basically, actually no, we need it for all our Typhoons and all our aircraft, so you can't have it. I think it would have been a very good aircraft and would have entered service roughly 1943, or possibly even as early as 1942. And I think a Blackburn Firebrand in service in 1942 would have been very, very useful. You know, this if you consider this in service with a fairly reliable Napier Sabre rather than the fricking Centaurus, which is in service 1940, late 1942, early 1943 with the Royal Navy. That's a very powerful aircraft. And in fact, honestly, with the way development was slowed down and organized and mucked around by the Air Ministry, this could have been in service with the Royal Navy in mid 1941. So not probably in time to deal with the Indian Ocean raid of the Japanese, but certainly in time to give the Royal Navy a very good and very useful advantage in the Mediterranean in 1942, 41, and 42. Which, again, would have been pretty useful. Also, imagine if when the Channel Dash takes place in 1942, if there'd been if the Swordfish squadrons which were on alert had been upgraded to this by that point. Imagine if this is what is attacking the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau. That'll make a difference, wouldn't it? Oh, no, that's a lot of bogus emails and YouTube accounts I've got to set up and in not much time. Cry. Thank you. Customers, my only suggestion would be to share videos on Facebook more often on the various fan web pages. I might try doing that, but I'm, you know. 9681. Was the F-14 unsuitable for the job of electronic warfare attack aircraft to replace the EA-6B Prowler? Not particularly. It just wasn't developed into it. Just glad. Enough already. You're on the right to return fire. One broadside you do. I am going to go wash the roof. So thank you very much, everyone. Yes, and a throttle quadrant that was actually not designed to drive the pilot of schizophrenia. Well, the thing is about the throttle quadrant again, Andreas Glad, is it was designed for, just wait for it, the Napier Sabre, not the Bristol Centaurus. So that's the thing. The entire aircraft is designed around one engine, completely designed around one engine, and then they're not allowed it, and they have to spend ages trying to find another engine which might fit, which the Air Ministry doesn't want. And you get this. Right, I'm off to grab a hose. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. What happened to the Warrior dinner invite? Why declined? I haven't declined the Warrior invite. If I'm invited, I will certainly be there. I'd love to have dinner on Warrior. I had to decline a dinner with HMS Belfast because it would have cost me money, and at the moment, I have to find money for a new car. Paul Wyatt, the German flak may have actually worked. Potentially, but the thing is, that thing would have been going quite so fast in, it would have been a ouch. Take care, DGB40. Take care, Graham Handler. Thank you, Andrew Glad. Thank you, John Evans. Thank you, Tian Wong. Thank you, Seneca Nero. Thank you, May6040. Thank you, Knight 6831. And thank you, Rosarski. Thank you, Stafford Thompson and Dan, for being excellent admins this evening. And thank you, Albazaski. Thank you, everyone. Sorry to cut it a bit short. I do know I do normally do 3 hours, but tonight I'm off to go and deal with firefighting, apparently, judging from the smell coming from my roof. Take care, everyone. It's a great pleasure to chat with you as always, and I look forward to seeing you on Sunday for our normal chat, which hopefully will not be punctuated by large explosive projectiles fired by people who haven't been through artillery training. Take care, Alfie Rowe. Take care, Jonathan Burrow. Thank you, John Shea. Thank you, DH89. And thank you, everyone. Take care. Have a nice evening. And thank you very much. Graham Handler. Thank you. Yeah. Take care, everyone. Thank you.